The wind swept across the Yorkshire moors like a living thing, howling through the chimney stacks of Alderbrook Hall. Once a grand country estate, it now stood silent and half-forgotten, its stone walls cloaked in ivy and shadow. Clara Hastings stood by the tall windows of the east wing, watching the mist roll in. Her reflection stared back at her, pale, tired, and older than her 32 years. It had been a year since the fire took her husband, Samuel. A year since the screams, the smoke, and the strange sound of footsteps running away from the flames, not toward them. The villagers had stopped visiting months ago. They said the place was cursed. That Samuel's spirit roamed the halls, whispering her name in the dark. But Clara did not believe in ghosts. She believed in guilt, in memory, and in the heavy weight of silence. When the letter arrived that morning, bearing the seal of a London firm, it pulled her out of her routine grief. It was from an architect named Julian Ward, requesting to survey Alderbrook Hall before it was sold to the county council. Clara hesitated. The house was the only thing she had left of Samuel, and yet, it frightened her more than anything else in the world. As the day faded into rain, Clara heard something, a faint creak from the corridor upstairs. She froze. The servants had long gone. Slowly, she turned her head toward the staircase, her pulse echoing in her ears. There, half hidden in the dim light, was a shadow, a man's outline, standing motionless at the top of the stairs. When Clara blinked, it was gone. But the smell that lingered in the air, a faint trace of smoke, was unmistakable. 2 days later, the sound of carriage wheels echoed through the drizzle-soaked courtyard. Clara watched from the doorway as a tall man stepped down, adjusting his coat against the wind. Julian Ward looked out of place among the crumbling stone and mist, his presence sharp and deliberate, like ink spilled on parchment. "Mrs. Hastings," he greeted her with a courteous nod. "Thank you for allowing me to visit. I understand it must be difficult." Clara gestured for him to come inside. The grand hall was dim, the smell of damp and old wood heavy in the air. A few portraits still hung on the walls, stern ancestors with eyes that followed every movement. Julian paused before one of them. "Your husband, I presume?" he asked softly. Clara's gaze followed his. "Yes. Samuel Hastings. He rebuilt the West Wing before the fire." Julian nodded, studying the architecture, tracing the outlines of charred beams and cracked plaster. "It's an impressive estate," he said, "though peculiar. Some of these corridors weren't in the original plans." Clara frowned. "What do you mean?" He unfolded an old blueprint from his satchel, yellowed with age. The drawing showed Alderbrook Hall as it had been a century ago. But in the place where Samuel's study now stood, there was a blank space, no walls, no doors, nothing at all. "I found this in the county records," Julian said. "It seems your husband added something to the structure that was never declared." A shiver ran down Clara's spine. Samuel had been secretive, always working late behind locked doors. She had assumed it was business. Now, looking at the missing section of the plan, she wasn't so sure. That night, after Julian retired to his guest room, Clara wandered the West Wing with a candle. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. She stopped before the door to Samuel's old study. The handle was cold beneath her fingers. When she pushed it open, the faint smell of smoke greeted her again. The room was just as it had been, books half burned, his chair overturned. But something new caught her eye. The edge of a rug near the desk had curled upward, revealing a small metal ring set into the floorboards. Clara knelt down, heart pounding, and pulled the ring. The floor shifted slightly, creaking under the pressure. Beneath it lay a hidden hatch, black with soot, leading to a narrow staircase descending into darkness. She hesitated only for a moment before lowering her candle into the void. A draft blew it out. And from somewhere below, she thought she heard the faintest sound. A whisper. Morning came grey and cold. Julian found Clara in the kitchen, pale and silent, staring into her untouched tea. The candle from the night before lay on the table beside her, its wax hardened and broken. "You went exploring, didn't you?" Julian said quietly. Clara nodded. "There's a hatch beneath the study." "I didn't go down, something blew the light out." Julian frowned. "May I see it?" Together, they returned to the west wing. The air felt heavier there, thick with dust and the faint scent of burned oak. Julian knelt beside the hatch, inspecting the metal ring. "Old, but not original," he murmured. "This was added later, perhaps within the last decade." He pried it open with effort, revealing the dark stairway beneath. The smell that rose from below was sharp and metallic, like rust, or blood. "Stay close," he said, striking a match. The steps were narrow and damp, leading to a low chamber lined with stone. Shelves sagged beneath the weight of glass jars and old tools. In one corner stood a worktable covered in soot, papers, and what looked like blueprints. Julian brushed the dust aside and squinted. "These plans, they're for Alderbrook Hall," he said. "But look here, this is a duplicate structure. A hidden section, directly beneath this one." Clara leaned closer, her eyes wide. "You mean there's another level?" Julian nodded grimly. "Or there was." Before they could study further, a sudden crack echoed from above, the hatch slamming shut. The candle flickered violently. Clara gasped. "Someone's up there," she whispered. Julian raced up the stairs, pushing at the trapdoor, but it would not move. They were sealed inside. From the other side came the slow scrape of wood being dragged across the floor. "Clara," Julian said, his voice low, "there's something else here." In the dark, Clara's gaze drifted to the far wall, where faint letters had been etched into the stone. She lifted the candle closer. The words were rough, but readable. "Forgive me, see. He made me do it." Her breath caught. "That's Samuel's handwriting," she whispered. And just then, from somewhere beyond the wall, came a sound like breathing, soft, labored, human. Julian raised the candle higher, his expression tight. "We're not alone down here." The air in the cellar turned colder. The candlelight trembled as if the darkness itself was alive. Clara stepped back, her hand gripping Julian's sleeve. "Who's there?" Julian called out. His voice echoed against the stone. No reply came, only the soft rasp of breathing continuing from beyond the wall. Julian ran his hands along the rough surface, searching. The stone was uneven, patched with soot. His fingers found a crack wide enough to slip a knife through. "There's space behind this," he muttered. "A hollow chamber." He grabbed an iron tool from the table and began to chip away at the wall. The sound of metal striking stone filled the room, sharp and relentless. Clara flinched with each blow, the echo pounding in her chest. After several minutes, a piece of stone gave way, and a thin gust of stale air burst through the gap. Clara gasped. The smell that came with it was foul, like rot and damp ashes. Julian widened the hole enough to peer inside. A small chamber lay beyond, no larger than a closet. Inside it, the candlelight revealed something that made Clara stagger back. There was a chair. On it sat a skeleton, dressed in the black remains of a suit. Around its neck hung a tarnished locket. Clara's trembling fingers reached for it, her breath caught in her throat. She opened the locket, revealing a tiny portrait of herself, painted years ago. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Samuel had this made for me before we married." Julian stared at the figure. "Then who is this?" Before Clara could answer, a sudden creak echoed from above. The sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving across the floorboards. Then another. And another. Julian snatched the candle and turned towards the stairs. "Stay here," he ordered. But Clara grabbed his arm. "No. Whatever's up there doesn't want us to leave." The steps stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then came a faint whisper, carried through the gaps in the floorboards. Clara. Her name. Spoken in Samuel's voice. The candle flickered violently, throwing shadows across the wall. Clara's heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. Julian, she whispered, what if that isn't a ghost? Julian's jaw tightened. Then we need to find out who's pretending to be one. The trapdoor creaked again, just slightly this time, as though someone above was waiting for them to move. And in that instant, the candle went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. The scent of damp stone and ash filled Clara's lungs. She clutched Julian's sleeve, her voice trembling. Julian, we must get out. He struck a match, the flame flickering weakly in the stale air. The light cast long, unsteady shadows on the stone walls. Quiet, he whispered. Listen. From above, the faint rhythm of footsteps began again, slow, deliberate, pacing the length of the west wing. Whoever it was, they moved with purpose. Julian pressed his ear to the wall near the staircase. He's heading towards the study, he murmured. If we climb up quietly, we might catch him. They ascended the narrow stairs, every step groaning beneath their weight. At the hatch, Julian pushed upward cautiously. To their surprise, it opened easily now, as if whoever had locked them in wanted them to come out. The study lay before them, dimly lit by the grey morning light. Everything was in its place, except the rug. It had been moved, dragged roughly aside. Julian scanned the room, jaw tight. Someone's playing games. A sound echoed from the hallway beyond, a door closing. Clara turned sharply, heart hammering. He's here. They followed the noise through the corridor and into the drawing room. The air was cold, and a faint smell of wet earth drifted in through an open window. Julian moved ahead cautiously, his boots silent on the wooden floor. Then Clara saw it, muddy footprints, fresh and distinct, leading from the window across the rug and into the hall again. Whoever it is, he came in from the garden, Julian said. And he's still inside. Before Clara could reply, something fell from the mantelpiece, a framed photograph. It shattered on the floor, glass scattering at her feet. Beneath it was a faded image of Samuel, smiling beside a man Clara didn't recognize. Julian picked it up, brushing off the dust. Who's this? Clara frowned. I don't know. I've never seen him before. But as Julian turned the frame over, a note slipped out from behind the photograph. Written in Samuel's hand, the words were simple and chilling. If he finds this, run. A sudden gust slammed the window shut, and from the hall came a soft creak, like someone leaning against the floorboards, listening. Julian lowered his voice. We're not alone, and whoever it is, he knows we've found the cellar. Clara's pulse quickened. Julian, do you think? He cut her off. I think Samuel was hiding more than just blueprints. Outside, the wind howled across the moors, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled. Inside Alderbrook Hall, the echo of footsteps began once more, moving closer this time. The storm raged outside, its roar muffled by the thick stone walls of Alderbrook Hall. Clara moved cautiously through the library, the flicker of a single candle guiding her way. Her pulse throbbed in her ears as she traced the edge of the rug where Julian had noticed a hollow sound earlier. Kneeling down, she pulled it back, and there it was. A narrow outline of a trapdoor, barely visible against the old oak planks. With trembling fingers, she pried it open. A gust of cold, stale air escaped, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decay. The candle flame quivered. She hesitated, glancing back towards the door, half expecting to see Julian appear. But the hall remained silent, its corridors swallowed by shadows. Taking a deep breath, she descended the creaking steps into the darkness below. The cellar was larger than she expected. Rows of forgotten trunks lined the walls, and cobwebs hung thick from the beams. Her candlelight caught something metallic glinting in the far corner, a small iron chest, locked and rusted. Nearby, papers lay strewn across the floor, their ink faded with age. She bent down and picked one up. It was a letter, addressed to her, but written in Henry's hand. The date sent a chill through her, 2 days before the fire. Her eyes scanned the trembling words. My dearest Clara, if you find this, it means the truth can no longer stay buried. Alderbrook's wealth was built not on inheritance but on deceit. I tried to stop them, but they will come for me tonight. Trust no one, especially the man who calls himself Julian Ward. Clara's breath caught. The candle slipped from her grasp, sputtering out as it hit the ground. Darkness consumed her. For a moment, all she could hear was the pounding of her heart. Then, from above, the sound of footsteps echoed through the library, measured, deliberate, descending the stairs towards her. She froze, every muscle tensed. The light of another lantern appeared at the top of the steps, throwing long shadows across the cellar walls. And then she heard his voice, calm and steady. Clara, Julian said softly, I told you not to come down here. The lantern light caught his face as he stepped closer, and in that moment, Clara realized that Henry had been right all along. Clara stepped back until her heel struck the iron chest. The cold from the floor seemed to rise through her bones as Julian descended the last step, the lantern casting long shadows that danced across the walls like specters. His face looked different now, harder, more deliberate, as though the man she'd trusted had been nothing more than a disguise. Julian, she whispered, her voice trembling. What did you do to Henry? He smiled faintly, though his eyes held no warmth. Henry was a fool, he said. He thought he could expose the truth about Alderbrook and walk away unscathed. I tried to reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. Clara's breath caught. So you killed him? No, Julian replied quietly. He set the fire himself. He wanted to destroy the records, every trace of what his family did. I only made sure he never came back. His words sank into the silence like stones into deep water. The sound of the storm above seemed distant now, almost unreal. Clara's gaze shifted to the iron chest behind her. What's in there? She asked. Julian's eyes flicked towards it. Proof, he said. Documents your father forged when he sold land that wasn't his to sell. Henry discovered it years later. He was terrified that you would find out the truth, that the Hastings name was built on someone else's ruin. Clara's pulse quickened. You expect me to believe you? I expect you to understand, Julian said softly. Henry wasn't the man you think he was. And you, Clara, you were never meant to see any of this. He stepped closer, the lantern light glinting off something metallic in his coat pocket. A knife. But before he could move again, a crack of thunder shook the hall above, and the trapdoor slammed open. Wind howled down the stairs, extinguishing Julian's lantern. In the darkness, chaos erupted, a struggle, a scream, the sound of metal striking stone. Clara reached blindly, her hand finding the chest's handle. She swung it with all her strength. A dull thud followed, then silence. When the storm's echo finally faded, she was alone. The only light came from the candle still burning faintly near the stairs, flickering like a heartbeat. She staggered towards it, chest heaving, and looked back. Julian lay motionless on the ground. The knife was inches from his hand. But as Clara's eyes adjusted, she saw something else. On the floor beside him, a small black notebook, its leather cover worn and cracked. She picked it up, flipping it open to the first page. In Henry's handwriting, one sentence was written over and over, as if to remind himself of something vital. The fire was never meant to kill me. Clara sank to the floor, clutching the black notebook, her fingers trembling. The storm outside had faded into a quiet drizzle, and the first pale light of morning crept through the tall windows of Alderbrook Hall. She opened the notebook to the next page, her eyes scanning Henry's precise, deliberate handwriting. If you are reading this, Clara, it means the truth has survived the fire. The hall, the cellar, everything was part of a plan I could not complete in life. You must understand, the Hastings fortune was never yours by right, and the secrets hidden here could ruin more than just a name. Beware Julian Ward. He came to protect the truth, but his methods are uncompromising. Clara's mind raced. Julian, he had seemed her ally, yet every word in this notebook painted him differently. Had he saved her from Henry's wrath, or from the law? She rose, her knees weak, and walked slowly to the trapdoor. Peering down into the hidden cellar one last time, she saw the traces of soot and scorched wood, the place where secrets had literally burned. And yet, among the ashes, Henry's notebook had survived, a fragile testament to the past. Outside, the rain had stopped. Mist rolled across the moors, curling and shifting in the morning light. Clara closed the trapdoor and pressed her hand to the wood, feeling the weight of the hall, the legacy of the Hastings family, and the truth she now carried. In the distance, Alderbrook's chimneys puffed faint smoke into the sky. Life was beginning anew. Clara took a deep breath and stepped into the hall, leaving the darkness behind, carrying both the burden and the clarity of what had been hidden for so long. She would need to decide what to do with this truth, how to reconcile the deeds of the past with the life she wished to live. But for the first time in weeks, the oppressive weight had lifted, replaced by a quiet, resolute courage. The hall was silent now, yet it seemed to breathe with her. The story of Alderbrook, of deceit, fire, and survival, had finally found its witness. And Clara, standing among the echoes of the past, understood that even amid darkness, some truths cannot be buried forever.